Welcome to Brush and Beyond, where we see the world through an artist's eyes and learn to express our own worlds. Hi everyone, welcome back to the second episode of the Geography of Art. Last time we explored Florence, but today we're traveling to a city that is completely the opposite. A city with no roads or cars built right on top of water. This is Venice, or Venezia in Italian. A miracle city built on 118 tiny islands. The city that painted with light. By the end of today's episode, you'll understand a real mystery. How did a city built on muddy islands become one of the greatest art capitals in all of Europe? We have 6 clues to solve this question, so let's get started. Before we begin, let's make a fun comparison. Remember Florence? Now picture a city that is almost completely opposite. Florence was an inland city, and it made money from wool and banking. It was ruled by the Medici family, and its art was all about line and mathematical perspective. But Venice is built completely on water, and it grows rich from sea trade. Venice is a republic, so there's no king or single ruling family. Finally, Venetian art wasn't about lines, it was about color and light. And while Florence faced inland Italy, Venice faced the east. So here's the big lesson. Different geography grows completely different art. And that's the whole secret behind this series of Geography of Art. Here's the big idea. Florence and Venice represent 2 completely different ways of making art, the 2 great competing visions of the Renaissance, or Great Shift. Florence asked the question of how the figure is constructed. Florentine artists believed in drawing, and they called it disegno. They started with precise outlines, careful anatomy, and mathematical perspective. To them, a painting was built like a piece of architecture. On the other hand, Venice asked a different question. How did the world feel when light touches it? Venetian artists believed in color, or colorito. They care about light, atmosphere, and mood. For them, art wasn't like buildings. It was felt and experienced like music. Make sure to keep this contrast in mind, because every clue we find will explain why Venice fell in love with color. Alright, let's officially get to meet Venice. First, Venice is made of 118 small islands, connected all by bridges and canals. Can you imagine? All the streets of the city are made of water. Second, Venice's earliest fortune came from something surprising: salt. Later, it grew super rich from the spice trade. Third, Venice was the most powerful sea empire in the Mediterranean. Its fleet controlled almost all trade between Europe and the East. Fourth, Venice was Europe's gateway to the East, connecting the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. Fifth, the Venetian Republic lasted more than 1,000 years, which is incredibly rare in history. And finally, sixth, Venice was the capital of color. Its school of painting was famous worldwide for bright and vibrant hues. And remember, Venice has no roads and no cars, so only boats and canals. Now for the exciting part. Let's think about how a city built on mudflats became an art capital of Europe. After some research, we found 6 clues. Our first clue is that Venice was built on water. Second, the trade empire. Third, Venice is a gateway to the east. Fourth, Venice places a huge emphasis on color and light. Fifth, it's a republic. And finally, sixth, Venice has a huge market in printing and glassmaking. Let's look at each of them one at a time. Clue number 1. Venice was a miracle on the mud. Our story begins with danger. About 1,500 years ago, the Roman Empire collapsed and fierce invaders swept all across Italy. To escape, people rowed onto a shallow, muddy lagoon and settled on tiny islands, way too watery for armies to follow. The lagoon became a natural moat or protection, and for 1,000 years, no enemy ever conquered Venice. Here's a fun fact about how Venice was actually built. Venice sits on really soft mud, so they weren't able to use heavy stone buildings. Instead, Venetians hammered down millions of wooden poles through the mud and the water until they hit a hard clay layer called Coranto. The poles are packed really tightly together, and they form what's called an underwater forest. And here's the magic. The poles are underwater where there's no oxygen, so they don't rot. and instead they turned really hard, almost like stone, over centuries. And on top of these poles, they laid wooden platforms and then waterproof stone, and built these beautiful buildings. Some of the wooden poles holding up Venice's churches have been underwater for over 1,000 years, and they're still holding strong today. Here's why this matters for art, though. Humid, misty air over the lagoon scattered sunlight into a soft and glowing haze. This water reflected the sky and the buildings everywhere, so Venetian artists grew up seeing shimmering colors and soft light without any sharp or harsh outlines. The geography around them literally shaped the way that they saw the world, and therefore the art that they created. So how did Venice get rich? Following the chain, it all started with salt, which, before refrigerators, was as precious as gold because it kept food from spoiling. Venice made salt from its own seawater and controlled the trade. Then, their main economy became spices. Venice became the great meeting point between Europe and the East, controlling all of the trade routes, and whoever controls the trade routes controls the money. This made Venice one of the richest and most international cities in all of Europe. That wealth paid for endless paintings in churches, palaces, and government halls. Here's a fun fact. The famous traveler from the game Marco Polo was Venetian. He journeyed all the way to China and was gone for 24 years. And his book inspired later explorers, even Christopher Columbus, who owned a copy. Only a trading city as connected and diverse as Venice could have produced his work. Here's something surprising. While most European cities looked inward toward one another, Venice looked outward toward the east. It traded closely with the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. That one difference in direction filled the city with exotic goods, gold, and brand new ideas. You can see a great example of this in its most famous church, St. Mark's Basilica. St. Mark's Basilica has 5 great domes copied from a church in Constantinople, over 8,000 square meters of glittering gold mosaics inside. Many of its treasures were brought home from the east, and honestly, it looks more Eastern than Italian. The whole building is a giant sign saying that Venice is where 2 different worlds meet. So what exactly did East give to Venetian artists? They gave amazing gifts, and these are the real reasons why Venetian paintings glow. The most precious was an ultramarine blue, a deep, brilliant blue ground from a gemstone called lapis lazuli, mined far away in Afghanistan. It costs more than gold. The East also brought gold leaf for glowing backgrounds, the secrets of fine glass making, beautiful patterned silks, and above all, a deep love of bright and rich color. Other European artists couldn't easily get these materials, but in Venice, they arrived right in the harbor.